Hello and welcome to NewsClick. After the ruling by the Arbitration Council of the UN Conference on the Law of the Sea with regard to the South China Seas and the imbroglio there, China now seems to be concerned about India's position on this whole episode. To discuss this, we have with us retired Commander Atul Bhardwaj. Welcome, Atul. What do you think is China's concern with regard to India's position? Why should China be bothered at all?
A few years back, China said that its territorial claims and its sovereignty issues that it is talking about is one of the core issues. It identified it as one of the core issues. Now, gradually in this entire South China Sea imbroglio which we see now, there is an extraterritorial power. That extraterritorial power is United States of America. Now, this basically, and it is engineering because of its reach, because of its naval reach, because of its economic reach, and because over the years it's built. It has got much greater hold over the countries. So, China is increasingly getting isolated on this particular issue. The recent judgment of the arbitration tribunal which you mentioned, to which Philippines had gone unilaterally basically, and in the judgment has actually said that China does not have any claims at all. Chinese historical, China using history to claim some part of those exclusive economic zones has got no legal standing. That is exactly what the tribunal has said. So, China, it has come as a jolt to China. Sure. It has come as a jolt to China because China is now, because this particular issue is also impacting internally. Internally, there are a lot of people who feel since China has made it into a core issue, therefore, internally the Chinese population expects its government to do much more on this. So, India comes in, China wants India's support, basically it is gathering support from various other countries to make its case stronger against the United States. The fight is actually, I see, between the United States and China.
But does the fact that there are other littoral states involved in this, the Philippines, Vietnam, various other countries, equally also have disputes with China over the South China Seas issue? Philippines went to the Arbitration Council, others are watching this. Does India's relations with these countries also is one of the issues which China is bothered about, and how that may play into India's relations with China or India's position with regard to the South China Seas dispute?
No, immediately after the verdict which came out, there was an ASEAN meet. Now, that ASEAN was divided on this particular issue. Malaysia supported the verdict, Vietnam supported the verdict, but there were many other countries which did not support the verdict. So, as far as China is concerned, it is not really bothered about what is the equation between Philippines and India, or Philippines or India and Vietnam. That may not be one of the major botherations.
The main concern is whether India, in concert with the United States, would take a particular position or not.
Because if the conflict is to escalate, where would India stand? Would India allow its land to be used as basis for further launch into China? That's the basic Chinese concern. Sure. China is not really looking at a war with India, but India in a larger war is a Chinese problem. And you take Philippines. Why I said that the larger issue is between China and United States is because if you take Philippines itself, Philippines has a history of being erstwhile colony of the United States, and later it was the United States had its bases, and recently 5 new military bases have been established in Philippines by United States of America. The Chinese say that, and the Chinese have obviously been very vocal and very vehemently said this entire verdict passed by the arbitration council, arbitration tribunal is actually null and void. They say that the president of the court was a Japanese living in Europe who was selected, and this Japanese president then had selected other 5 members of the jury. China does not represent itself in the tribunal. So, this they say is a very one-sided judgment.
China chose not to represent itself in the council,
but
they did not recognize the jurisdiction of the council on this issue, and therefore decided to not go with the arbitration tribunal.
Because their point of view is, Chinese point of view is that if 2 countries are going for arbitration, then they need to mutually decide. For example, India and Bangladesh, they went to the international court to decide their boundaries, but they decided mutually. Because now what has happened is that one party has gone to the court, the order is not implementable. So, the order, rather than actually helping to solve the problem, is actually escalating the problem to the next level.
Yeah, but to play devil's advocate on this issue, China has also taken a large number of unilateral actions on its own, like building of the artificial islands in the South China Seas. Now, that was not done in consultation with the other littoral states.
No, I agree with you that China has been building in those islands. It is not that the China has not, but the fact is, which does not really come out in most of the writings that you see in India, which I would say are largely Western writings, sure, is that there are in that whole disputed area of Spratly Islands, there are more number of islands which are occupied by Vietnam and Philippines than they are occupied by China. This whole issue started coming up in the mid 70s. Before that, the issue was not there, existed, but it was not really on the surface. The other countries, Vietnam and Philippines, have also built on the islands much before the Chinese started building. The Chinese now have the capital, of course, and the scale at which they are building is much large, because they have the money. Just as the United States has the money to send its aircraft carriers right up into the South China Sea, no other country can afford that. Sure. So, to counter, if China is asserting and being, militarizing the entire area, there are others who also are militarizing. So, it's very difficult to really isolate China on this particular issue, because the pressure is being exerted from both sides. Sure. China is, because now it is powerful, it has the money, it has the equipment, so it is also taking a tough stand. Yeah. Unlike earlier years when it would lie low, it is not lying low anymore.
China has also taken a position recently that it is likely to declare defense notification zone around the artificial islands that it has created, which means that shipping going through that area or aircraft overflying that area need to notify the Chinese authorities and seek their permission for overflying Chinese airspace or the ships going through Chinese waters. This is likely to bring China into conflict with other nations, not only littoral nations, but trading nations, maybe including India as well. Do you see this as one of the things that need to be resolved between India and China or between other nations?
Definitely, in case there is some issues which need to be resolved. But if you see UNCLOS, actually, China has said that, and one has not seen any big incident where the freedom of navigation has been curtailed. The ships, according to UNCLOS, even in your territorial waters, unarmed ships can come in.
Sure.
Within the 12 nautical miles. If China is suppose occupying one particular island, and if it claims that it has its territorial sea extending, only the warships, only armed ships have to announce before coming in.
Sure.
Others are not required to come in. So, there is, before this, the matter was being resolved within the area, within the region, mutually peacefully. Now, there is an additional element which is being added to it. So, that additional element, whether it all sides of the region has to decide whether it wants to decide things unilaterally or through war. War will be a more dangerous proposition for all of them.
Chinese foreign minister was in India recently and held fairly wide-ranging discussions. This was preceded by fairly extensive comments in the Chinese media about India's stand with regard to this South China Seas imbroglio. What have you heard about discussions that took place between India and China on the South China Seas issue during the Chinese foreign minister's visit?
India has been very ambivalent on this entire issue. On one hand, it supports the verdict, on the other hand, it really wants to play it down, because there is a political angle to the whole verdict.
Sure.
Which is being highlighted. There is a legal angle to the whole verdict, and the legal angle is actually could boomerang on you later, because if you see, the verdict actually has said that Spratly Islands are not islands at all. It has termed the entire, it has said that they are not islands only. So, they are rocks basically, which come up during the low tide period. So, this has long term implications. If you see your own island chains, or if you see your own territorial claims, sometimes both US and Japanese territorial claims in the sea could come in for challenge based on this verdict later. So, India is little cautious in its approach, whether to go ahead and fully support, like on NSG issue. One of the contentious issues between India and China recently has been NSG, and China has said that it is ready to discuss. But when India was expecting Chinese to support them on NSG issue whole hog, when you had placed 4 of your warships in South China Sea during that particular period, when the NSG meet is going on. So, China is basically looking at, what I heard the Chinese saying is that they are looking at some kind of a reciprocation from India, which they feel is not coming. And they feel that India is more and more getting aligned, strategically aligned to the US thought processes.
And that would have been at the center of China's concerns
during
discussions with India.
Because now China has very openly declared that Xi Jinping, in his very recent last month party congress, they are celebrating the anniversary of the Communist Party, and he has very clearly said that they are going to get into an alliance with Russia now, and in next 10 years a new world order is going to emerge, which is going to be different from what the existing world order dominated by the United States imperialist order. So, in that sense, the world is now getting more and more polarized. And your first question was, why is China looking at India? Because China is looking at India because it wants it in a larger anti-imperialist orbit, which is being created. So, now it is for India to decide whether it wants to be where it stands, where its interest lies.
I think we need to watch the space in the months and years to come, because I think matters are, I am fairly sure, likely to get more complicated before they get more resolved. Thank you very much, Commander Bhardwaj.